Hello, I'm Mary Reese from NJPSA and FEA, and I welcome you to our annual fall conference sponsored by New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association, its Foundation for Educational Administration, and NJASCD. We are thrilled that we were able to welcome to our first day of the conference Jennifer Abrams, who's with us today. And she presented a phenomenal keynote and followed up with a workshop as well to expand upon the thoughts that she introduced. So, Jennifer, we're really happy you're here.
Thank you.
And I thought what I would do is just ask you about a couple of the key concepts that you discussed today so that our members can either refresh what they heard from you or learn some new information.
Terrific.
So I was particularly impressed by the idea of our conversations invent us. So we have to be really sure when we're having these conversations with any particular audience that we don't diminish, but that we expand and enhance that relationship. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that is a quotation from a book called The Dance of Connection by Dr. Harriet Lerner. And one of my achievements in life is that she follows me on Twitter. I'm just so touched. Anyway, she's a psychologist and she's written a number of books, and they're really all about communication. And this idea that how we have conversations is so essential, not just what we say, not just what we're hoping organizationally or operationally gets done through this task conversation, but how we speak really has, it has an impact. And I know that I have been in conversations that have diminished and narrowed possibilities. I've received emails that have done the same thing. And just the choice of words really can expand and enhance possibilities, make people feel like they're seen. And in the end, don't we all recall things that invented us? Like it was through that experience with a teacher that I thought I could become a, right? So this idea that how we talk matters, we know it, but the question is, do we study it so that we can actually really be in an intentional conversation with our language?
And that leads me to ask how you became involved in this area. Just what you're saying makes it sounds as if you've had the experience to better understand the way conversation should flow.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you wound up where you are today?
I was a high school English teacher for 10 years and then went to a district office in Palo Alto, California, Palo Alto Unified School District. And at that point, I realized that I had a credential in how to teach, and I didn't have a credential in how to talk effectively to other adults. And I needed to study many things. So I studied cognitive coaching, and I studied facilitation with adaptive schools, now thinking collaborative. And I studied mentoring with Lipton and Wellman. And what I realized in all of that was just how important question asking was, or who you are in relationship to your colleagues. And what really struck me that then the book Having Hard Conversations came out of was we don't know how really to do that as well as we need to within the field of education. And if there was a book in the field, it was always a difficult employee or a difficult parent. And I thought, how can I figure out how to do this in a more humane and growth-producing way? And so I wrote myself a workbook, and that's how I got here. It was just moving into roles that required the skill, not finding many books to really study the skills, in and realizing I had to write my own. So I wrote myself a workbook.
And you've written several others too. Tell us about your newest.
My newest, I'm excited about. I just did a breakout on, was Stretching Your Learning Edges, Growing Up at Work. And the up is in parentheses, because I'm not trying to be diminishing my grow up. It's really, what do we as educators and professionals need to develop within ourselves to be more cognitively capable, psychologically mature, emotionally stable in our teams, because the work that's going on in schools is so challenging at times. And if we have a greater developed center and are able to work from that, we can be a better profession. We can work in teams that function more professionally. And I was talking about Tim Clark's comment of we need less social friction. We got enough intellectual friction going on in the work. How can we work on our language so that we have less social friction? Because there's just so much going on. Why add anything?
Mhm.
So that's what I did in my breakout session and why I really love this work.
So, along those lines, though, what happens if there are employees or team members who don't buy into this concept?
It's an interesting question that also came up in the breakout, and I was looking very, very honestly, authentically, and thoughtfully at the woman who said it, because she said, I don't want this to be compliance. You can't just say, be a professional.
Mhm.
And yet, we have standards, we have bottom line expectations. So whether people buy in at one level, it's not something to be bought into, it's something to actually expect. I start thinking, like, I don't buy into the fact that I have to sit down and put my seatbelt on a plane and sit down during takeoff and landing, but that's just how we work in safety in planes. There is a bottom line that I think isn't about buying. What I think beyond that is an explanation of what it will do if we are like this with each other for the well-being of the individual, for the physiological well-being. If we are having conversations that enhance and expand as opposed to diminish and narrow, your heart rate goes up. But your heart rate doesn't go up. Your blood pressure doesn't go up. Being in conversations that are more adult and psychologically mature will physically shift your capacity to be able to be healthier. And so I can look at it from a well-being standpoint. I can look at it from an efficiency standpoint. I can look at it from a culture standpoint. It really does have reason, and it will actually make your life day to day so much easier.
Sounds like you're talking about a mindset shift.
Yes. Yeah. For some people, it's a mindset shift. Other people who have experienced a culture where people are thoughtful and intentional and able to suspend their certainty and build their resilience can physically see in front of them that this is actually a better place to work.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
most definitely. So, along those lines, you said that somebody is always learning how to be a person when they watch you, and I add, listen to you.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I have a quote that I use from a person who's on Instagram. Her name is Mrs. Calvin. She's from Atlanta. And her quote is, somebody's learning how to be a person by watching you. Let that sink in. And it's obviously, she's a primary teacher. She knows the kids watch us. And Ted and Nancy Sizer years ago in the Essential Schools movement wrote a book called The Students Are Watching Us. And if we are wanting to model, as I bet many of us are, if not all of us, what we're hoping for kids to be and how to behave and how to express themselves, you got to watch everything that you're doing. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a robot, or it doesn't mean that you can't make a mistake, or you can't cry, or you can't yell. The question is, how do you recover from that? Because they're watching how we handle things.
Mm-hmm.
And in this time of polarization and floods and wars and everything, how do we manage our anxiety? How do we talk across difference? How do we take a look at the needs for inclusivity and belonging? How are we creating that? Kids are watching, and so that's what I really hope to get when I want that feeling to be out there that what I'm talking about and what I hope that we're discussing in our things is how to be a better adult self, because kids are paying attention.
Mm. It's interesting you mentioned Ted and Nancy Sizer. I was just talking about them last night.
Wonderful.
His last presentation with his wife was at one of our annual principal centers in Princeton. And it was heartbreaking to see this great man have difficulty communicating. But boy, did he leave a legacy for us all to build upon. Wonderful man.
We need to go back to some of the books that I know are not contemporary and look at the ethic and look at the thoughts, because I think we need those sages from our field.
Yes, great reminders. Just listening to what you were saying about somebody's watching us. Do you do work with parents and community members?
Yes, I have done work with families. When I go to international schools, this is often the case, where they say, if you're here, we want all of our community to have an opportunity. So I have done workshops on how to have conversations that you find difficult with your teachers, the teachers of your children. I've done workshops on all of this, of how are we modeling from the home to the school, and done workshops with parents that way. I also do workshops on how to have hard conversations with parents, with faculties.
Sure.
So yeah, from every angle, I think that adults need to develop their skill. So,
absolutely, regardless of what their role
Exactly.
is. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I really enjoyed the concept of collective responsibility. And you mentioned before about growth producing and being humane. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So there are times when I'll do workshops, and particularly around having hard conversations, where people will whisper to me, if the administration did this, we would need to know this. And I don't think anybody's let off the hook in terms of any of the work that I'm doing. Yes, there are moments when people in certain positions must take responsibility for a task, no doubt about it. And, I use the word and all the time, it's a collective responsibility for all adults in a school to be able to speak up around what matters, have a hard conversation, take responsibility for expressing concerns before they become complaints, understand how best to apologize. It isn't just those people who have an office or a business card or a position of authority. It's all of us. The students are watching all of us. And so you're a paraprofessional, you're the secretary, you're the custodian. It's a collective responsibility on behalf of every adult in a school to be able to speak in humane and growth-producing ways.
Most definitely, because the students are all ours.
Yes. Correct.
All of us.
Correct.
Regardless of what the role is within a community, a school community.
Absolutely.
So it's incumbent upon them all to be able to converse in a humane and growth-producing manner.
Absolutely. And that means that there might need to be additional supports and trainings for people who might just say, oh, I'm doing my job, but I don't know how to talk to the kids, or I don't know how to talk to adults. That we say we value adult growth, no matter your position, and we want to support your development because students are watching. And so giving some time to people who might not always get that kind of training is also essential.
And you mentioned the secretary,
Yes.
custodian, security guard.
Absolutely.
I would throw in the family liaison.
Yes.
Because oftentimes they're the first time a community member or a family member
bet.
meet the school.
I agree.
And-
They're the door. They're the strong door.
Mhm.
And so I have a dear friend who was a hostess for many years at a restaurant, and she would talk about being the strong door.
Mhm.
And if that's the introduction, the secretary, the security guard, that interaction, adult to adult, needs to be thought about and valued and supported. And if that requires some people to learn and study more to create that, it's essential.
So when you go out to schools and have these conversations, and
Mhm.
do you set up the parameters early on with the idea of being inclusive in
Yes.
terms of bringing staff members together to hear the
Yes.
same message?
It depends on the situation and the context. Many times, if I'm there on a staff development day, that hasn't been a payday for some of the other members of the community, and so they're not there. It would be wonderful if I could encourage all to show up. There are moments when they say we have to have somebody in the front office, we've got to have somebody. So it's a little more challenging. Having said that, if I can be as intentional as possible, I want everyone to be there. And that includes everyone.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Do you have like a blog or
Yes.
a video series that,
Yes.
let's say, the security guards weren't able to attend? Or is there something they can
Yes.
listen to?
So at my website, which is jenniferabrams.com, I have different, drop-down menus on the first page. And one of them includes video presentations. One of them includes podcasts. And I definitely have videos around having hard conversations and the work that I do. And also, I have a newsletter called Voice Lessons. And somebody literally thought that was me teaching singing. That is not the case. It's about your voice. How do you find your voice around what matters? And so that can also be found on there, as well as you can subscribe.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
And finally, another thought about cognitive speed bumps. Can you talk a little more about that?
So in the work I do around hard conversations, there is a moment before people are like, I want the script, right? And they don't want to think about their problem. And I say, we have to slow down. And that to me is a cognitive speed bump. So I suggest to people in the book, Having Hard Conversations, in chapter 3, that they think about the timing. They think about the doability of what they are hoping. They think about the likelihood of success given the context. They think about whether they're personally too engaged and it's really a pet peeve and it doesn't matter. They think about all of these things, and I call those things cognitive speed bumps. And between that and planning with an outcome map, I think it cognitively slows you down so that you're more ready to have a hard conversation. I'm not suggesting if you are you hit a speed bump, you're still going in the same direction. You're just going at a lesser speed. So for me, that's what I call cognitive speed bumps.
Along those lines, you talked about the clarity, and then you also just mentioned about standards. And from an administrative perspective, these hard conversations were important because it was really the right thing to do.
Correct.
For myself, for the other person, but for the whole environment and culture. So, do you find that people agree with that thought?
Yeah, no, I think people completely understand when they look at the expectations and they see it not being met, or they see that they've had norms or agreements, or there's data that students aren't getting what they need. They're fully aware that they really should speak up, and they're committed to trying to do that. They have a lot of internal fears. They might not have found somebody to support to find that language. There are a lot of sort of logistical things that they fear getting in the way. And one of the other things is they go, what if they yell at me? What if they say this? What if they say that? And I say, what are you going to say? And they say, I don't know. And I said, well, let's back up the truck and actually think about it. Because if you are really sure that you've had some clarity,
People aren't getting caught off guard. This is an expectation and you're not seeing it. You've been humane in how you're saying it. If they yell at you, you should feel on your side that you were emotionally mature, you were cognitively, thoughtful. And so, yeah, that is a response that could happen. But on your end, you can feel good that you have been as best you can, as humane and as growth producing as possible. So yeah, they'll yell, and so what? We have to get into necessary trouble. The kids need us.
Exactly. I mean, it's the right thing to do.
That's right. Oh, thank you.
Well, this has been delightful.
Thank you,
I'm so
thank you.
happy you ventured to Atlantic
I
City
know.
to join
I'm
us,
excited.
and
Thank you.
I know you have many followers in the audience. They
appreciate
love you dearly, and that's one of the main reasons why you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate the
So,
opportunity.
why don't you push your books once again for the audience? And let
Yeah.
us
So
know.
having hard conversations and every other book minus stretching your learning edges, growing up at work. That's at miravia.education. Every other book can be found on Amazon or found at Corwin or Solution Tree. But just go to jenniferabrams.com and you'll find everything.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.